But I mentioned the lawsuit that could end Obamacare. And it's interesting. The only place I've seen this reported, at least today, the only place it's easily found is over at Talking Points Memo. And Shahil Kapoor, who has been a guest on our TV program a number of times, I think he's been on our radio show as well, on this show. There is this new it's considered a long shot lawsuit against Obamacare. And it is an appeal. It's before an appeals court right now, and then it'll make its way to the Supreme Court. And let me give you the summary of it. The summary of it is that the actual literal language in Obamacare says that the subsidies, if you buy health insurance in Obamacare and you make less than about $80,000 a year, you actually get a discount on your insurance. And in fact, the average new person buying Obamacare right now is paying less than $100 a month in the United States. And it's because they're getting these federal subsidies. And they're getting these subsidies even in the red states that haven't expanded Medicaid. Still, working people who earn enough to qualify for Obamacare, not for the Medicaid, but for Obamacare, they're getting these subsidies. And because these states are not participating and they're not setting up their own exchanges, the states aren't picking up the tab and allowing the federal government to block grant it to them. The money is supposed to go from the federal government to the state to your insurance company. But in these states that refuse to cooperate, it's going from the federal government directly to the insurance company. Well, here's what the law reads. The law reads that the provisions of the premium tax credits will go to, quote, an exchange established by the state. And so the lawsuit says these states aren't establishing exchanges. Therefore, the federal government has no authority to give this money to these insurance companies that are operating in the states that have not established exchanges. And technically, they're right. This law was written fairly hastily for something as big and expansive and long-term as it is. And, so is Social Security. And the Social Security Act has been amended hundreds of times over the years. Maybe more than that, maybe even thousands, I don't know, but certainly hundreds of times on a bipartisan basis in good faith to make the bill better. But because the leadership of the Republican Party, Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, Jeb Hensarling, Pete Hoekstra, this is all in the House, Kevin McCarthy, senators like Jim DeMint, Jim DeMint, Tom Coburn, Dr. No, John Kyle, John Ensign, and Bob Corker. Because these guys, had the caucus room conspiracy meeting in January 20th of 2009, and they swore to each other, we're going to deny Obama a legacy. We're going to deny him a successful presidency. As Mitch McConnell said, my number one job is to make him a one-term president. So as Pete Sessions said, we're going to become like the Taliban. As Kevin McCarthy, who's now the House Majority Leader, said, we are going to fight him on every bill. And as a consequence of that, Obamacare has all these little problems. And they should be fairly easily fixed. But the Republicans will not fix those problems because that would mean basically improving Obamacare. And they're committed to destroying Obamacare, not because they don't like the idea of Americans getting health care. I think a lot of these people are, they're decent people. Deep down inside, if they ever met the family of that young woman, I'm forgetting her name, who died because she fell into Charlene Dill, who fell into the red state donut hole. And she knew she had a heart condition. She'd been to an ER. And she had to take a third job to pay the bill for the ER. And they told her, you need to take this medication or you're going to have a heart attack. And she couldn't afford the medication, and she didn't qualify for the Medicaid. She was in a state that in Florida where Rick Scott refused to expand Medicaid. And so she had no choice but to work a third job to try to just pay off the ER bill, and then maybe she could afford to pay for the medication. And she had a heart attack and died while she was working her third job. And she had a little kid. I think most of these Republican legislators, if they looked Charlene Dill in the, well, they'd have to look her in the coffin now, but people like her, that they would have some compassion. But that's not going to get in the way of their absolute commitment to stop the first black president in the history of this country from having a successful presidency, or frankly, any Democrat. There's a large element of racism among the Southern politicians and even some of the North. And there's a large element of, Republican rule here. And the Republican Party knows they're losing. They're demographically losing. They're culturally losing. And so what are they doing? They're rigging the game. In fact, students now, using the 26th Amendment, are suing against these voter suppression efforts. So anyway,